Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and to the second part of Aisling's Haulout. As you saw last week, we got the bird out and we've started on the base sanding everything below the waterline, and I already started going at a couple of bad patches. Lots of these are fairly shallow, but it's worth inspecting, so they weren't all bad. 2 or 3 or 4 of them actually had a proper bubble and had some fluid leak out, but for the most part they weren't too bad. I think in this video I'll patch a whole bunch of them. You may or may not see all of that because I don't have too much footage. I've now been on the hard, I think, for just a few days, and I've already started work on some of the really bad patches, specifically right here on the rudder. So these were previously repaired patches somebody fixed a few years ago, obviously before me, and then that whole area at the rudder stock needs to get repaired. On the starboard side of the rudder I've already started patching and repairing, and that's far from all of it. There's still so much more that needs to happen. Making our way around the port side, not as bad as I would have thought, but I was surprised that this side ended up having the most real problems. I've got some helping hands today. I got a guy who helped for a day from the yard, and Dave came along. You saw him round the corner with his hat on helping me grind away, and this is a lot more than before. Here's an actual leak that needed dealing with. I had to go a lot deeper to deal with that one. And then these ones, and here I've already started patching one, and then something flew in. Some styrofoam flew by and ended up all over my repair job. No biggie, I'll fix it. Right, let it not be said that we didn't prep. Dave spent most of the day on this side of the boat, on the starboard side, and going over areas that he'd already done, and then we would come around after behind him with a sander and just try and get most of that red off before I start fixing these little blisters. I think we in total spent 5 full days just sanding. This, I think, is the third pass that Dave is doing, coming around the starboard side and working his way aft, and then coming up the rear from the port side and moving around the front of the boat is one of the guys from the yard, and he's coming along with a finer sanding disc. I think that's like a 100 or a 120, and as he moves his way forward he'll come around to join up with Dave. And I think that is the end of it. We did not actually do more sanding. We did sand above the waterline. I'm afraid you're not going to be able to see that. And we painted, but that's coming up. Dave finishing up around midship, and for some strange reason we had such wonderful clear water on this day, so I took a walk around the yard to have a good look at it. Off camera I've been working on the port side, so let's have a look and see how many more holes I've found. It's important to note that a lot of these are not very deep. They're fairly superficial. They're maybe 2 mils down. I've just taken the edge off, the front part of it off. And now I'm starting to work on this really bad portion. And this I can't avoid. Sadly, this is a major issue and needs to be dealt with. So what I've already done is grinded away at this. So it's got a very nice keyable surface. And that middle area that has a massive crack, I'm starting to fill that in now. It's already the second or third filling that I've done, so it's almost flat. I think this is the final bit of thickened epoxy I'm putting over it. I probably went in about 6 mil deep with the grinder and just widened up the crack. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but I was able to fill it, and this is now the top coat. I'll see if I can include an image here of what it looked like right at the beginning. And as you can see, it wasn't that big a crack when compared with my finger, so I did have to open it up. I made it a lot bigger than it needed to be. All the same, rather be safe than sorry. What we also ended up doing is making sure that when I did gloss, as you can see here, that I got it nice and thick. We did several layers. That's now the first full layer that you just saw, and this is the, I think it's like 850 gram triaxle that we used, so we kept it really thick. And we also overlapped, so here is the overlap when we did that crack at the bottom that you saw from the first video where the slings were that lifted us up. That goes all the way around to the other side, on the port side, and then just above that 2 layers, fixing the port side of that crack, so the other side that you see me working on now, and that got well fixed. So I'm confident that when we do the fairing here, that I don't need to return to this area ever again. Hold thumbs. So now the sun is setting and it's coming close up to the end of the day, and I can have a quick look and see how far I got. I've opened up a lot more little blisters than I initially wanted or was expecting. I started grinding that out. Dave was doing some more fixing up right at the very end of it all, on the aft side, starboard aft side of the boat, just under the transom. But I'm just about ready to start doing some patches and some glasswork on some of these blisters. Right, back to glasswork. So in the middle of your screens is one of the areas that I've already patched, at least the first layer. I've now got to put a second layer on. As I mentioned, they're not particularly deep. Lots of them are 2 or 3 mils deep, and I mean they're as deep as I grinded, but they weren't really bad, and most of them were superficial. So areas where perhaps a large barnacle had dug in a bit, leaving these tiny little puncture holes. Once you get through the paint and the little first layer of fiberglass, it really isn't that bad. This one looked like it had been an old through hole, perhaps years gone by, and it looks like it had been drilled out and someone had stuck a batten in, a fiberglass batten, and then just that was their repair. So I'm now covering that up. It had a slight raised ridge when we were sanding the hole. I noticed it, and there's some on the port side as well. So here we just take a piece of, I think I was using a chop strand, and we coat it down. I like to glue it in place by putting a small layer down first. It holds it up for me so it can be sticky. When you work on vertical surfaces, it's often easier to do it that way. And then I just dab it in with my brush. I think I put two more coats on here, or rather two layers of fiberglass on here, and that's pretty much how it went for most of these repair jobs. And Carolyn's gone ahead and prepared a bunch for me to do next. So she's working ahead of me, cutting these up and sticking them on. And now the nicest part of all of this is to start painting. Nothing like a fresh coat of paint. This is a red Interguard. It is a primer. The entire top side has already been sanded down. I think we did it quite aggressively, an 80 grit, and no, a 60 grit and then an 80 grit. And now we're priming it with this red primer. Since the top coat is going to be a gloss white, I wanted a color that I could tell the difference. So at this stage, we've been out a full week since this was done in April of last year. It was literally, I think, over the Easter weekend. So we've been out a week and a bit, maybe 2 weeks at this stage. So I've got 2 weeks left to get a lot of work done. This is Austin, who some of you will recognize from the Argus restoration videos. And Austin came along to help out, taking care of some of the painting work while I was doing other work inside. I've obviously had to replace all the through-hole fittings and had to prep for all of that, and I'm mixing up paint for him and handing it over while he's working topside. I think at this stage we'd also finished the rudder pretty much completely. The rudder's already painted with its white primer, and most of the blister areas on the side, you can see just underneath Austin there where he's wiping. They've already been faired and sanded and primed over. So it was a very successful week of fixing a lot of these. Some of them had to wait until almost the last minute because they were still drying out, and some of them I had to go deeper. But I think there were only 4 or 5 of those ones. And the rudder stock area has also been repaired, so this is a good close-up picture. The fairing's already been done over the glass, and it needed a bit of sanding still at this point. But I think you can see that it looks pretty decent, and I'll try and get a picture from the other side. As you can see, a perfectly reasonable repair job, if I do say so myself. I think I sanded these all down a few times and patched up a few more little areas. I wanted it to be pretty, even though it didn't need to be pretty. It's the part of the boat you genuinely never really see. Austin continues on his merry way at 1000 speed, painting the side of the boat. These are the last bit of footage I actually have, so painting this side of the boat, the port side, until he completes it. I don't have any other footage because I think this is when I realized there was no point recording anymore. There was just too much work to do. But you can clearly see here the progress he's made and the progress that we've made underneath the waterline, with all of those patches now having been repaired, faired and primed. So the boat is just about ready to get a spray job done underneath it and get the primer on below the waterline. I think I've only got some pictures of that, but not much else. If you look closely below the waterline here, you'll see just at the nose that there are three patches that have not been repaired yet. They've been glassed, however, but I'm waiting for them to dry out. They needed to wait for a bit longer. The one on the top right was pretty bad, and I eventually went really, really deep with that one. I think I went about a centimeter, so that's 10 mils deep. I took a huge chunk out of that. And just below it, almost at the center of the screen at the bottom, you'll see it's already fed. That one completely randomly started leaking again. Somehow we drew up some moisture somewhere else, and that had been open for 2 weeks, and there was nothing. So these are the kind of surprises that kept me up at night. So I'll try and include some pictures now since I don't have much footage. This is the starboard side completely done, and it looks pretty good. I've got to say, I almost thought perhaps I should keep it red, but yeah, it's maybe a bit too dark for me. Though it does look good. We're now free to begin work under the waterline. I think before I even do that, we'll start spraying the top side. I think I left it for 2 days before I got round to that, and there's still plenty to do under the waterline, and patches to do and patches to fix, and some fairing. There's always more fairing. So at this point I'm doing an inventory of what I still need to get. I need to make a run into town. I've got to get some through-hole fittings, because when I took them off, this is what they looked like. It always looks good from both sides, but once you've actually taken it apart, you realize there's very little holding it all together. I think it was just Sikaflex that was holding it together, and that's pretty bad, knowing that I've got to trust my life, I guess, to these fittings. Not good at all. So I'm making a town run, and Austin continues to paint. The thing I needed to get was some bits for the spray job. There's a teaser, what it looks like with the white all done at the bottom. Once we completed the top, I wanted to make sure I had the first coat of primer around the entire bottom half. Obviously we still need to come along and patch and fix and fair little areas, and they don't look very good. So here's an example of exactly that. This is the next day, and I'm coming along and fairing small imperfections. I'm obviously not going for the most pretty, but I want it to be fairly decent. We haven't quite made it round to the port side yet, but you can see I've done a lot already. That includes topside, where we've just primed. The top side is where you'll notice the imperfections the most, obviously that being above the water. There were lots of strange little dents, and I wanted them gone. especially here, right at the transom. So this part splashes between the water. I think once we're heavy, it's just under the water. And this is the following day. I've now sprayed the entire top side, and it looks pretty good. This is the first coat of Interthane 990, so it's sort of a shiny two-part epoxy paint, and it goes right over the red and you don't even see it come through, so it looks pretty good. With the packets removed and the bottom side of the port side done, sort of what the boat's going to look like is starting to shine through. And this is what those patched areas look like. Right at the back, the stock in front of the rudder, it's almost as if there was nothing wrong there at all. Pretty cool. So I found some cell phone footage of the tie coat going on. So this is my airless sprayer. This really saved me a lot of time. Had I not had this, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I had gotten in the time that I had. Remember, I only had a month to do this entire boat, and every month in the hard is money out the pocket. And it did a pretty good job. This is the first coat of the tie coat going on, and I think it's a Sigma tie coat. It worked really well and saved me tons of time. I think I did the entire boat in 45 minutes, including mixing up the paint. So at this point, this is what we have pretty much completed, and it's not looking too bad at all. Just moving around the boat so we can see how it looked. Not bad. And this is a progression from before to after, and this is a progression from right at the beginning. Looked pretty decent. Our hardware has also arrived. I have new anodes and new through-hole fittings. They're ready to go on, and then I can start on the top coat again. So this is the second coat and final coat of the top coat, and it's just been sprayed on and it's looking really good. So I'm comfortable with that, I'm happy with that. All we need to do now is start prepping the three-hole fittings, put all of the various fittings on, and then I need to get the anti-foul on. I think at this point I had less than a week to get ready to be back in the water. And just like magic, there's the anti-foul already completed. So approaching completion date and starting to look like a real boat. I still have to do the boot stripe at this stage, but she's starting to look really nice. There's the new through-hole fittings. This is for the engine out, and I think this is for the sink in for the flushing toilet, and that's for the engine in. So all that's left to do is to put the name on the boat. Since I'm basically done, here the boot stripe is done and I'm finally putting her name on. This is quite a big moment for us. We've been trying to do this for a few years since we've had the boat, but it was a really good time out on the hard. It was emotional and it was stressful, and it took everything out of us, physically and emotionally, but we're here, we're at the end, and she looks pretty good. These are the final last pictures with the name on everywhere. It's still a lot of tidying up that needs to happen, and then it's launch. But this is the final result. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for waiting for this video. I know it was late, I had so many issues with my rendering. Thank you so much. I will see you all next week. Bye.